Hi, this is Henning from FlippedNormals, and in today's video we are going to go through the new hair tools found in Blender 3.3. This is an incredibly exciting new release of Blender, and the hair tools are a lot of fun to play with. So in this video we're going to go through the basics of these tools. As a heads up, this is not going to be a grooming video per se. We're not going to go through how to create a fancy groom for this guy. We are simply just going to go through the different hair tools, so it's a very quick and easy video to follow. Now, before we get into the tutorial, if you're interested in switching to Blender from other software, here is a course we made especially for you. This is a course that assumes that you are not a beginner to 3D, but you are a beginner to Blender. So in this course, we cover everything you need to know in order to get started with Blender, from modeling, texturing, lighting, rendering, and much more. Just that we do it in the format that does not treat you like a beginner. So with that said, moving on to the tutorial. So before we get started with the actual hair tools, you have to know that the hair tools do require a UV map for your model. So what you can do is, if you don't have a UV map, you can make a little hair cap like this, or you can just do some quick UVs on your character. In this case, we do have some quick UVs on this guy. A hair cap though is generally recommended when you're working with hair because it makes it less destructive. Let's say there is a model change. Now you can very easily just retain the hair, and also it means that you are separating the hair out from the overall model. But for now, we are just going to go bye-bye with this one because we're not going to be using this. So the way we are going to be working with the hair is first hit Shift and A to bring up the add menu. Then we go to curve, and then we go to empty hair. And now you can see we have a curves hair object over here in the outliner. Hit the M key to move this to a new collection. And we're going to call this hair underscore collection. Then we have it right here. Now, nothing has really happened yet because we have to actually add the hairs to it. So go to the sculpt mode. Now you have to have this enabled for this to work. Go to the sculpt mode, or you can hit Control and Tab, and then you go to the sculpt mode from here. And now we have a selection of tools, and we're just going to go through these really quickly. So the first one is the add tool, and this allows you to add new geometry to it, or new hairs rather. Now, a caveat about this new hair tool is what you see is what you get. There's nothing fancy about this tool, at least not on the surface, because if you add a strand of hair, this strand is going to be in the render. There's no interpolation between this. You don't really have modifiers on this. If you want to change the hair, you just have to change the hair using these brushes. By default, it's going to look like this, but I find it to be a bit confusing because I'm not really an icons guy, or I like to read more what's going on. So we're just going to be dragging this out like so it's easier to see. Then we have the delete tool, and this does exactly what you assume it would do. This deletes it. Hit the F key, or hold on the F key rather, to scale the brush. And now you can just either go in and just delete all of them, or you can just delete one. So we can just add a few more hairs like so. Then we have the density brush. The density brush looks a little bit like the add brush, but this just adds density to it. And you can change the size again with the F key, and you can change the density with Shift and R. So now you can see that the higher the particle density is, you can see here, then the higher the density is going to be. Think about each one of these as like basically one strand of hair, and that just makes it nice and easy to visualize. So if you want a high density, Shift and R and make this real dense. And if you want low density, Shift and R and make this very sparse. So now if we were to go over this, it's going to match the density. This is not an eraser brush or anything like that. This is simply a density brush. So if you want a high density in certain areas, you just do this. So it looks similar to the add brush, but it's not. It's just a density brush. And then if you want less, you do this. So you can just make, for instance, a gradient with this as well. So very nice and simple. Then we have the comb brush, and that does what you would assume the comb brush would do. This allows you to comb the hair. And this is the main styling brush we have. And this is the one you're going to be using for the vast majority of the time. So very nice and simple. Then we have the snake hook brush. This is similar to the snake hook brush when it comes to sculpting. This is a really cool brush. This allows you to really change the length and also change the size at the same time. Or rather change the length and the shape at the same time. So we can use this to like add long, nice hair to our character. Then we have grow shrink. And that is going to, well, grow and shrink. If you hold on a control key, it's going to shrink it. And if you just hold on left mouse button, or in this case, I'm using a tablet, and you just sculpt on top, it's going to grow it. So this is really useful. This is the ones I use the most, actually, at least a lot when it comes to the styling, because you can very quickly just change the amount here, or change the length. Then Shift and F is going to change the strength as well. So that's going to change the actual strength up here. I prefer to have this just set to 100 because it really gives me nice control. But if you want less, just hold on Shift and F or go up to the strength menu here. Then we have pinch. A pinch is going to pinch the hairs together like so. We don't have a clumping modifier like you do have in other software, and also like what you have used in the old particle system. So we have to be very direct about what we want. So now we want to pinch it together, you want to clump it together. This is how you do it, using the pinch brush. There's not a whole lot to this. This is a very simple and nice and easy pinch brush to use. Puff is going to kind of do the opposite. This is going to restore it so it goes more straight out from the surface like so. And then the smooth brush is going to smooth out stuff that has too much noise in it, or rather it's just going to smooth out the curve. It's a very simple brush. The slide brush you want to be careful with. I'm just going to delete a whole lot of stuff here just so we don't have too much, because the slide brush is very heavy on performance. So I just want to make sure we don't have too much stuff going on. We're just going to have like one. So the slide brush allows you to slide the hair around the brush, and you can see how slow this is even with one. So just make sure you don't use the slide brush too much. In my opinion, it's better to delete the hairs you want and then add them back later on instead of using a slide brush. You can see now, even now, it's starting to give me issues. You can see that it's the Windows slider or the Windows spinning thing is doing its thing. So just delete, and then I'm going to show you some things with the add tool, which is really handy. So this is where to change the count. One click is going to now give you 1. One click is now going to give you, set this to like 5, it's going to give you 5. So this is very, very useful. What you want to be aware of though is that it's generally best to start with few strands of hair and then use the density brush or the add brush to interpolate between, because this gets pretty heavy to, or not even heavy, just difficult to groom. So now let's say that we have some overall shape to this using the comb brush, and let's say we have some length to this. Then what if we want to interpolate between these when we add something to it? Well, this is very easy to do. You can go under the add brush, and then you can go to what says curve shape, and then we can interpolate the length and the shape. And now if we were to just add something to it now, let's just add 1 just to keep it simple. Now you can see that this does interpolate the length and the shape of what's already there. So that's one of the reasons you really want to just make sure that you add 1 and then you shape that, and you add 1 and you shape that. If you disable this, you can see this is where you can change the length as well. So you can set this to like 2. And now this is 2 meters. You go in and you change this to 0.1. This is now going to be 10 centimeters. So this is a good way of doing it. And now if you go to curve shape and we interpolate the length, now you can see that we're going to get a nice little gradient between these. So that's really useful. You can also access this menu if you click the End key, and then we go to Tool, and then you have more settings. Not even more settings, you have some stroke settings and such. But this at least is where you can change the settings for the brush itself. You can also enable symmetry as well. This is really useful. Up here to the top right, you have symmetry on X, Y, and Z. So if you just go and set this to X, you can now see that this is going to symmetrically add points to it. So this is a good idea. Now you are adding just with symmetry, then you can disable the symmetry, go to the comb brush, and then you can just start to groom this independently. Now there's a tool we haven't talked about, and it's the selection painting up here. So if you go to up here, you can see selection paint. What this allows us to do is it allows us to paint selections. We just have to be aware that we need to have either this enabled, which is going to be the sculpt selection like so we can sculpt on it, or this one, which is going to select individual strands. So what happens if we just do a quick paint over the whole thing, and then we try to comb it? Now you can see you can only modify what's been painted. Now, something that is a bit annoying, just a little tangent, but what is a bit annoying is that you can't really see the hairs super well. So I prefer to give this a color. So I prefer to go to materials, make a new material, and then we go all the way down like so until we have viewport display, and then we'll just make this into a nice saturated color. This is not a huge problem at the moment, but this will become a bigger issue as we are working with this. So what if you want to only select one though? What if there's let's say we want to change this one. We want to change the shape of this. That's very tricky right now. So what we can do, we can go to selection paint and click on the second icon. And then we will just select the one, just paint on top of it. Then we can go to comb, and then we can just go in and we can modify this. And that's very, very useful. So again, selection paint, go in under one of them. You can hit the A key to select everything, or you can just select one of them now and then comb, and there we go. Now, related to this, we can do the same thing when we were adding points. So a workflow for this is if we just delete everything now, hit the A key to select everything, and then we can go to add and make sure this is set to the second option. Now, if we just add a point like this, we can just change this a little bit longer. We can change this to something like 0.7. So now we have a bit more length to play with. So we add one, and let's say we want to add another one here. It's tricky to do this without like affecting the other one. So what we can do, we can, with the add tool enabled, hit Alt and A, which deselects everything. So now you can't really modify any of this, right? If you were to try it, you actually can't. But if we go to add now, you see now everything is deselected, but the current one. So now if we go to comb, now we can just change this one up. So now we can go in and we can modify this to heart's content. Let's say this is fine. Then we go to add. We can change this to length and shape. Alt and A. And now we can add another one. Comb, change this up. Add, Alt and A. So the preferred method I have now is that I go in and I just hit Alt A after every single one. And then once you have some general hairs you can play with, then you can go in and you can play around with a density brush. And this is really useful because this method, just hit the A key to select everything. This allows you to really get the shape first, and then you can add density to it later. Just make sure length and shape is set. So now you can very easily go in and you can just add density to it. But again, remember, this is not a smart system in the sense that it's very destructive and it's very direct, which means you can control every single strand of hair. But if you have a lot of hairs, like if you're doing a full head of hair, this is going to get quite heavy. So this is where you really want to be sure that you have individual control over things as well. Like, you go under the selection paint, you just do this, and then we go under comb, and then we just modify this like so. And there you go. So the hair tools themselves are nice and simple to use. They're nice and stable. I haven't had any crashes with this whatsoever. So they're really nice and stable to use, but there can be a bit limiting. And the reason for this is that they're not procedural in any sense. We don't really have modifiers to play with. There's no way to change the thickness of the roots and the tips or anything like that. We don't have any noise or any of that. But what we do have is we have geometry nodes. So with this selected, we can go to our modifiers, and now you can see we have geometry nodes. Problem is though, there aren't any geometry nodes for hair enable, like there aren't any setups for hair. So in order to do that, we have to make our own geometry nodes. And honestly, that's quite a lot of work. Like you first have to learn how the system works, then you have to spend hours making these nodes. But luckily, the guys at the Blender studio have made well, they're currently working on a short film, I believe, and they have made some tools for us. So if you go to the link provided, this is from studio.blender.org, and this is where you have Einar, which is the hair grooming file. And you can download this one, and you can simply just delete everything that is not about the modifiers you have, or rather the hair node systems. So here, for instance, you can see that we have noise and we have hair thickness and such, which is really useful because this allows us to work very quickly, go in and add these geometry node setup into our scene. So I've already downloaded this and I've already cleaned up the scene and saved this out. So I recommend that you do the same as well. In the future, I'm sure these are going to ship with Blender, just cleaned up and such, and they're going to be a lot more available online. But for now, we are going to go to File, Append, and here is the file I currently have. So I'm just going to add, I'm just going to be adding hair noise, hair thickness, and randomize hair length. These are the ones that I found to be particularly useful from the scene. So append. And now if we were to go to, first, let's actually add a bit more density to this. We have a bit more to show. It's a bit easier to see exactly what's going on. And then we're just going to delete these guys as well. Hit the A key so everything is selectable, and there we go. And then we're going to be adding a geometry node modifier. And then we are going to go under here. And here you can see that we now have hair noise, hair thickness, and randomized length. So hair noise is going to do exactly that. It's going to add noise to our hair. And this is really useful. You really want to have some overall noise in your hair. Change the scale as well. Little tip as well, if you hold on a shift key, you get more incremental support so that you're changing lower values. So now you can just really change the scale of the hair. Then one I find to be useful is the hair thickness as well. In order to visualize this though, we have to first go to our render properties up here. Then we just have to go down to curves, and then we have to go to viewport display, and then we have to change this from strands to strip. And now you can see what's going on. So we want to make sure that we control this using a geometry node as well. So add modifier, geometry nodes, and then we're going to go under our scene here so we can see what's there, and then we can do hair thickness. And now you can see we actually have thickness on our hair. Now, if you want to control this, you see you don't have any attributes here. You know, it's a simple system, but it's working once you open up the geometry node editor, which we're going to be doing by going here, geometry node editor. And then here you can see that you have control over the overall thickness of the hair. Again, not the most intuitive, but it's enough to give us some additional control. So now you can see that if we were to go in now with comb, and the cool thing is that this is actually manipulating the hairs directly. Like this is not some kind of modifier, which is just on top in some kind of theoretical way. No, this is actually modifying the hair. So this is really cool because this allows us to really control the hair. So using geometry nodes is a fantastic way of really controlling the hair, because if you want this level of noise in the hair, this is honestly quite tricky to get right. So this is not a geometry nodes tutorial. This is more just to say that there are geometry nodes out there, and I do recommend that you use this to modulate the hair. A little tip as well is that you can add the most commonly used brushes to your quick favorites. So now, for instance, you can just like right click on this, and then you can just add to quick favorites. The brushes I have here is the selection paint, add, delete, density, comb, and grow and shrink. These are the ones I use the most, which is honestly like most of them. But it just means I can go here, I can just go in, I can just do delete, and we can just quickly delete some stuff. Then we can do density, quickly add some density to it, and then we can quickly go into the comb. So I expect there to be pie menus for this kind of stuff in the future, but for now, the quick favorites is a great way of doing it. One thing though that is quite cool is that you can convert this to the old particle system. So with the sculpt node enabled, this is important, you go to curves, convert to particle system, and I can see the particle system has been added to the hair or to the object itself. And I can see that we have some duplicates. So then we can just hide the curves. Then we can go to our original head, go to object mode, and then we go to our object, and then we go to particles, and then we have the hair settings right here. And this allows you to get the styling from the new system with the options of the old system. We're not going to go too much into this because this is about the new features, but there are some cool settings. For instance, you can change this to simple if you want more hair. So you can set this to like more or less. And then you can set this to something like 3. Then we can change, for instance, we can go down here, we can change the roughness of things. So that you can very easily just, first this has to be set to 1, and then you can just change the roughness of things. You can change the endpoint, the size of things. You know, you generally have a lot more control here than you do with the new system. Or rather, it's different because you have more control in theory with the new one because it's geometry nodes, but it's easier to work with this. You can change a kink, for instance, to curls, so you can really just like play around with this. This is where you really want to hold on a shift key, so you have more control with this. So this is a really cool way of working. And this is also where you can change the tip and the root. So now, for instance, we can go in and we can just change this to a render viewport. And then we can change the tip and the root. First, we are just going to make a material for this, and we're just going to make this a bit darker so we can see what's going on. And then we're going to make another one, make another slot, and we're going to make a new material. And this is going to be the principal hair BSDF. And then we're going to go under the particle system. And then under render, we're going to be setting the material to material 03. And now you can see that this is rendering the new material, which is really useful. So now we've been using a combination of the old and the new system for this. So now we can change the thickness of the hair, which we can do by going under, just collapse this by hair shape, and then we can change the tip and the root. So now we can just make this 0.1, and we can make this something like 0.1, and now it should be nice and parallel. Or you can just change this around to whatever you want to. At least the point is now you have full control over the hair while using the groom from the old one. So that's it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the little notification bell to get notified every single time we put out a new video.